Okay, so in this tutorial I'm just going to be going over some of the really basic parts of Flash CS4, just so if you haven't used it before you can get familiar with it. There are three main big things I'm going to be covering in this tutorial. So the first one is the basic components of the workspace. The second is using movie clips, and the last part is doing some basic action script using movie clips. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing you need to know is whenever you're creating a new file, you want to use Actionscript 3.0. Actionscript 2.0 is a bit outdated, and most projects that are created are 3.0 if you're looking for help and stuff like that. Okay, so whenever you create a file, there's an option for FPS. FPS is just how smooth, basically how the frame rate. So how smooth your animation will be and how quick it'll play. The higher the frame rate, the smoother and the faster the animation. And next thing is the size. Unless you're doing a specific project, you may not even have to change the size, but you have things like you can change the background color by default, and you can also change the frame rate and ruler in this area. Okay. The next important thing to know is this black arrow here is going to be what you're using for most of your stuff. If you create something, you're going to want to select it with this black arrow. And when it's selected, it'll have this checkerboard of white dots on it. The lasso tool is used if you want to select part of something. So say you wanted to select part of this circle. You can just delete that way. That's an easy way of doing it. The free transform tool, which can be used by pressing Q. You just press Q. You can select and you can rotate. You can scale. Oh, sorry, it's shear. Yeah, you can scale. You can scale either proportionally or non-proportionally. If you want to scale proportionally, hold the shift key while you scale and it'll constrain its proportions. Another important thing about whenever you're using the free transform tool is you have this white dot here in the center. If you move that white dot, that'll be where it'll transform from. So if I rotate now, that's the anchor point on which it rotates. So that can be pretty important. Okay. The pen tool is just like the pen tool in Illustrator if you've used it. If you hold it, you can create Bezier curves, and if you click on each one, it'll break it so that it won't constrain the curve. Next thing you have is the text tool. Text tool is pretty simple to use. You just draw it out how big you want it, and then just type. So how about this is some text. And then within Flash you actually have a fair amount of options. You can change your font. So let's try this one. And you can change the size. If the text field isn't big enough, it'll create a new line. You can change spacing. So let's set that back to 0. You can change the color. You can align it left, center, or right. And you can also justify. Another thing that's fairly new is you can add effects, or as they call them, filters. So you can add things like glow. So if we take a look at it now, this has a red glow on it, which is actually kind of ugly, but and you can adjust values within that. Okay, so let's just delete this. We'll delete this text. Okay, you also have the pencil tool. Or actually, sorry, I skipped the line. So the line tool is pretty simple. Just creates lines that you can then transform, or you can also click on the points to alter the actual length and angle of it, which can be actually really quite useful. And if you click in the middle, you'll get this rounded line, which you can then curve it how you want it. Okay, the next button is the rectangle tool. If you hold the rectangle tool, You also have the option for ovals and other polygons. I'll just cover the rectangle in this one though. They're all pretty much the same. Um, so when you create an object, you have the stroke color and you also have fill color. So if you have to select whatever you want to change, and then you can just go in here and you can change it to whatever color you want. If you click on the line once, you'll get that line, but if you double click it, you'll get all lines that are attached to that one. So if you can actually change excuse me, you can change all the lines at the same time. Lines, unlike fills, you can change the stroke width, and there are also stroke styles such as dashed, like that. Okay. The next thing is the paintbrush tool. It's pretty simple. You have options such as smoothing. If you turn smoothing all the way up, it'll make sure there are no sharp edges. It'll sort of smooth them out. But if it's down at, say, 0, you kind of get a gritty look, and it's a bit jaggy. Okay, so that's the paintbrush tool. If you hold the paintbrush tool, you can also use the spray brush tool, which uses, it basically uses movie clips, and you can create random patterns of them. I won't cover the deco tool in this one or the bone tool because they're a bit advanced. So let's go to the fill tool. So if we create another rectangle here, and we double click on these lines to delete them, we can then select this, and if we click here on color, or if we go window color, we bring up the color palette, and you can just drag that to move it around. So we want to work with the fill, so we click fill here, and let's try and make a gradient. So we're going to use a linear gradient, and by moving these points, you change the strength and position of the gradient. So let's create a nice gradient from blue to light blue. And we can see that as we move them around, it changes the position. There are also different types. You can also have it so that it moves smoothly between each gradient, or you can just have no repeating. So once we have this gradient, if you go to the free transform tool and hold it down, there's the gradient transform tool. So we want to select that. You can select it by pressing the F key as well. So once we select it, we can then move the gradient around. We can move it up, you can move it down, you can scale it. And if you click this center, you can actually, shift it instead of just scaling. Okay, so I think that's good enough for the gradient tool and using the color palette. To change a color, you can just move through here, and you can change the brightness on the right here. Okay, the next part's the eraser tool. It's pretty simple. It works just like any other eraser. And you can change the size in here by clicking down below, or you can change the size. I believe you can change it. I guess you can just change it there. Okay. The grab tool is useful for actually moving the stage all around. This is great if you have very large files and a small stage size. And lastly, there's the zoom tool. So if you click once, you zoom in, but if you hold Alt, it zooms out, which is handy in case you don't want to switch to the reduce tool. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers all the tools. There's a few other things in Flash that I want to show you here. One of the ones I use the most is the Align tool. The Align tool is great if you want to make sure that things are centered or they're just in the right spot. So if you're working on the stage level, you're going to want to click this To Stage button, and you can align it however you want. So say I want to align it to the top right. You'll click this one here, and then you want to distribute it to the top. So it just aligns the corners. You can also set it up so that if you click these two, you center it up, and if you match the size of the stage height and width, it scales it properly. So that can be really useful if you want to make sure you don't have any overlap on the corners and stuff like that.